Hey Crestwood, happy Wednesday to you. Hope you all are doing well. Hope your sanity is intact as we make our way through this Advent season and get closer to Christmas. Hard to believe we are a week away from Christmas Eve and to all the beauty and sacredness and joy of that evening leading into Christmas Day. I want you to know that I'll be not doing devotionals the next two Wednesdays, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So I'll be back with you in January, taking a little break, but very glad to bring you this devotional for this Wednesday, December 17th. You may have heard me tell this story before. I know I've included it in a sermon, and I've told it a few other times. But to me, it's worth telling. This may be actually my standing devotional the day or the week before Christmas Eve, because it is still such a powerful memory for me. And it's a reminder to me of the promises of Jesus Christ coming into this world again and what that means for us. It was Christmas Eve, December 2020. We were in the throes of COVID. We had had great hopes that we would have been back in person a long time before Christmas Eve. But as COVID and the pandemic continued, we realized that was not going to be possible. So we were not going to be together as a church family for Christmas Eve. And so the staff had worked really hard to prepare a meaningful online Christmas Eve service, which is almost an oxymoron to say meaningful and online Christmas Eve service, but we did our best. We worked really hard to help make that happen. So when Christmas Eve came, at that point, Amy and I were dating, and she had been here for a visit, but had left to go back to Charleston the day before. My girls were gone to be with their mom, and so I was alone on that evening of Christmas Eve. And it felt so weird to just be sitting where I was living and to not be at church. So I went to church. I drove over to the church, went into the sanctuary. We had already decorated the sanctuary. Even if we couldn't be in there in person, we still did all the decorating to make it feel like it was Christmas in there. And so I went and turned on just the light on the communion table, which illuminated the nativity scene that was there. And I sat in the front row in this dark sanctuary with just that light shining down on the nativity scene. And I prayed and I cried and I just kind of took inventory spiritually of where I was in that moment. And it was not a good place. And so after sitting there for several minutes, I got up to leave, and I looked out sort of down the back of the sanctuary into the courtyard, and I saw a light back there. I thought, well, that must be a reflection of what's going on. It had been snowing pretty steadily that day, so there was a blanket of white out in the courtyard, and it was still snowing in that moment, actually. And as I walked down the center aisle towards the back of the sanctuary, I realized that light wasn't a reflection. There was a single light in the courtyard. And as I got closer and closer, I realized there was a silhouette of a person holding a candle. And I thought, who in the world at 11:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve would be standing out in the cold and the snow of the church courtyard holding a candle? And so as I got closer, I opened the door to go out into the courtyard, and I realized who it was. It was a church member who had lost his spouse that year. And he was standing there in the cold, looking into the sanctuary, holding that candle. And we looked at each other, and we both just started sobbing, just crying. The stress, the grief, all the emotions of that year sort of all came together in that moment. And I went over to him and I just hugged him, and we stood there hugging for a couple minutes, just crying. And then we both turned to look into the sanctuary. And as we looked down that center aisle, the light shining down on just the nativity scene. And we stood there and we looked at that. And we both just took in the magnitude of the meaning of what was happening that night in our world, in our community, in our souls, as we awaited the birth of Jesus Christ again. I will never forget looking out of that sanctuary and seeing a single light, a light that drove back the darkness of that night and the darkness that was in my soul. And I will never, for the rest of my life, forget that moment, standing with that person looking into the sanctuary and remembering there is a light that is coming. There is a reason to hope through the grief, through the tears, through the loneliness, through the solitude, through the despair. There is a light that is shining in the darkness. I pray you see that light this Christmas. See you soon, Crestwood. God bless you.